They say your whole life can change in a single heartbeat, but I never believed that until I was standing in my kitchen, coffee cooling in my hands, and my husband's face flickered across the TV. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, or maybe one of those odd moments when you see someone who looks familiar on the news. The anchor's voice was grave, words tumbling out about a fraud investigation, a string of aliases, a man finally caught after years of hiding. But it was him. Owen. My Owen, standing in handcuffs, his face turned away from the camera, but unmistakably him. The scar above his eyebrow, the way his mouth pinched when he was nervous. My husband, of 21 years, the man I'd fallen in love with in college, the father of my daughter. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because, honey, this story has more twists than a pretzel factory. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might faint. I fumbled for my phone, my mind racing with questions I couldn't form into words. Was this a mistake? Was it some kind of prank? I tried to tell myself it was impossible, but the fear in my chest was real. My daughter, Emily, came downstairs in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes, and I must have looked wild because she stopped short. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked, and I couldn't answer. I just pointed at the screen, hoping she'd see what I saw. She did. Her eyes widened, her face draining of color. "Is that Dad?" I nodded, my voice lost somewhere inside me. The news cut to commercial, and I called Owen's phone with trembling hands. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I could feel panic rising, a cold, prickling fear crawling up my spine. I dialed 911, my voice shaking as I tried to explain. "My husband. He's on the news. He's been arrested, I think. His name is Owen Taylor. Please, can you tell me what's happening?" The dispatcher was calm, almost too calm. She asked for details, his date of birth, our address. Then there was silence, the kind that makes you realize something is deeply, fundamentally wrong. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said finally, "but we don't have any record of an Owen Taylor matching that description. Are you sure you have the right name?" I stared at the phone in disbelief. "Of course I have the right name. He's my husband. We've been married 21 years. Please, there must be a mistake." She promised to send an officer to our house to take a statement, but her tone was patronizing, like she thought I was confused or lying. I hung up, my hands numb. Emily sat beside me, her knees drawn to her chest, eyes huge and frightened. "What's going on?" she whispered. I tried to reassure her, but the words felt hollow. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe the news got it wrong. But as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The images replayed in my mind, and a sick feeling settled in my stomach. I went to Owen's study, hoping to find something, anything, that would make this make sense. His laptop was gone. The drawer where he kept our important documents, birth certificates, passports, marriage license, was empty. Even the family photos that usually sat on his desk were missing. Only dust outlines remained, mocking me. That was when I realized he'd planned this. He'd known, somehow, that this was coming. A knock at the door made me jump. 2 officers stood outside, their expressions wary but polite. I explained what I'd seen, showed them the news segment I'd recorded on my phone. They watched, exchanged glances, then asked for Owen's information. I gave them everything I could. Social security number, driver's license, the details etched into my memory from a lifetime together. They ran the information and came back empty-handed. No record, nothing. It was like he'd never existed. That was when the questions started. Had I ever seen his birth certificate? His original driver's license? Did he have any family I could call? The answers tumbled out. No, he'd always said he was estranged from his family, that his parents had died young, that he'd moved around a lot as a child. But he'd been so solid, so present. How could I have lived with a ghost for 2 decades? The officers left, promising to follow up, but I could see in their eyes that they thought I was either delusional or covering for him. Emily clung to me that night, her small hands clutching mine, as if I might disappear too. I didn't sleep. I wandered the house in the dark, searching for clues. I found little things that didn't add up: a box of receipts for cash transactions, a set of keys I didn't recognize, a storage unit rental agreement in another name. My mind raced with possibilities. Was he a criminal? A spy? Someone in witness protection? The reality felt stranger than anything I could invent. The next morning, the news story was gone, erased as if it had never aired. I checked every channel, every website, but there was nothing. No mention of Owen, no mention of any arrest. I called the news station, and the receptionist sounded baffled. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We haven't run any story like that. Are you sure you're not mistaken?" I hung up, feeling the world tilt beneath me. Emily cried in her room, and I sat on the edge of her bed, stroking her hair, telling her it would be okay. I didn't believe it, but I had to say it. For her. That's when I found the first note, slipped under my pillow, written in Owen's precise, blocky handwriting. "Don't trust anyone, not even the police. Protect Emily. I love you." My breath caught in my throat. Was this some kind of sick joke? Or was he in danger? I read the note over and over, searching for meaning in the spaces between the words. The paper smelled faintly of his cologne, and I pressed it to my face, trying to remember the man I thought I knew. I'm not sure when suspicion hardened into resolve. Maybe it was when Emily asked, her voice barely more than a whisper, "Was our whole life a lie?" Or maybe it was the way the neighbors started looking at me, whispering behind curtains, the sense that everyone knew something I didn't. I decided I wouldn't wait for answers to come to me. I would find them, even if it meant tearing my life apart piece by piece. I owed that to Emily. I owed it to myself. You're watching Women Unwritten. Tap like and subscribe so more voices get heard. I started with the storage unit listed on the rental agreement. The address was across town, in an industrial park I'd never visited before. I told Emily I was going to the grocery store, not wanting to frighten her more than she already was, and drove there with my heart in my throat. The place was silent, rows of metal doors gleaming in the morning sun. My hands shook as I tried each key until one finally turned. The door slid open with a groan, and the smell of stale air hit me. Inside, I found boxes, dozens of them, labeled with names I didn't recognize. Some were filled with old clothes, men's and women's, none of which belonged to us. Others held photographs, hundreds of them, each one carefully labeled on the back. Portland 2003, Jake. Dallas 2008, Eric. New York 2012, Michael. Each photo showed Owen, or someone who looked almost exactly like him, but with different haircuts, different clothes, standing next to strangers. Sometimes smiling, sometimes stone-faced. I sat on the concrete floor, surrounded by these ghosts, trying to make sense of it all. Who was he? How many lives had he lived before me? And what had he done to make them all disappear? There was a safe in the corner, bolted to the floor. I searched through the boxes until I found a slip of paper with a code. 0716. My birthday. I punched it in, and the door swung open. Inside, I found stacks of cash, several passports, all with different names and Owen's face staring back at me. There was a gun, heavy and cold, and a small leather notebook. I opened it, my hands trembling. The first page read, "If you're reading this, I'm already gone." I sat there for a long time, the notebook heavy in my lap, the world suddenly too big and too empty. Everything I thought I knew had unraveled, and all that was left was a trail of questions, leading further and further away from the life I thought I'd built. When I finally made it home, Emily was waiting for me, her face streaked with tears. I hugged her tight, promising her that we'd find the truth, no matter what it cost. But deep down, I wondered if the truth was something we could survive. Women Unwritten. I saw my husband on the news in handcuffs, but when I called the police, they told me he was never real. Part 2. Docs. The next morning, sunlight leaked through the blinds and landed on the notebook still clutched in my hand. I hadn't slept. My mind replayed every conversation, every anniversary, every late night when Owen would come home just a little too tired, a little too distracted. It all seemed to shimmer with new, menacing meaning. I kept thinking about the note he'd left under my pillow. Don't trust anyone, not even the police. Protect Emily. I love you. I got Emily off to school, doing my best to act like everything was normal. I made her oatmeal and packed her lunch, forced a smile as I waved her out the door. The moment she was gone, I locked every door and window and sat at the kitchen table with the notebook, flipping to the next page. Owen's handwriting looked stiff, almost like he'd been rushing. I'm sorry for lying, it began. There were things I could never tell you. If they're reading this, it means I failed to keep you safe. Don't call anyone from my past. Don't try to find me. If you must, destroy everything in this notebook. I kept reading, desperate for some hint, some clue that would explain why my life had suddenly turned into a maze of secrets and warnings. But most of it was just lists, cities, dates, initials, and a few short cryptic notes. Trust L only, one read. If they contact you, say the phrase, yellow tulips. I stared at that for a long time. Who was L? What did yellow tulips mean? I copied the phrase onto a piece of paper, as if it might somehow become useful. Then I called the only person who might know anything. My sister, Claire. She'd always been suspicious of Owen, always said there was something off about him. We hadn't spoken in months, my own pride mostly, but now I needed her. Claire answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. Anna, is everything okay? I tried to keep my voice steady. I need your help. Something's happened. It's about Owen. There was a pause. Then she told me to come over. I could tell she was already bracing herself for the worst. When I got to Claire's, she poured me coffee and sat across from me, watching me with that mixture of concern and skepticism she'd perfected over the years. I told her everything. The news story, the police, the missing records, the storage unit, the notebook. Her face went pale. I always thought he was too good to be true, she said quietly. But this? Anna, are you sure you're not? I'm not imagining it, I snapped, angrier than I meant to be. I have proof. Look. I shoved the passports and the cash across her kitchen table, the notebook open to Owen's confession. Claire picked up one of the passports and studied it, her hands trembling. This isn't just a fake name. These are real. Who was he? I shook my head. I don't know, but he wanted me to protect Emily. That's all I know for sure. Claire squeezed my hand. Then we protect her. Whatever it takes. I wanted to believe that would be enough. But by the time I got home, I saw the first sign that someone was watching us. A white van parked across the street, the kind that could belong to a florist or a plumber, but it never moved. I noticed it again that night, engine idling, headlights off. When I tried to get close, it drove away. My nerves frayed. Every sound in the house made me jump. I started locking Emily's window at night, double-checking every door before bed. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the fear never left. 2 days later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name typed on the front. Inside was a single photograph. Emily, walking home from school, her backpack slung over one shoulder. On the back, in shaky handwriting, "You're being watched. Stop digging, or you'll regret it." I dropped the photo like it was poison. My hands shook as I called Claire, my voice barely a whisper. Someone is watching us. They sent me a photo of Emily. Claire's voice hardened. You need to go to the police. I don't care what Owen said. But I remembered the dispatcher's words. No record of him, no story on the news, nothing. I didn't trust the police. Owen's warning echoed in my mind. Don't trust anyone. That night, I pulled Emily into bed with me, pretending it was just a sleepover. She didn't ask questions. She just curled up next to me, her breathing steady, while I stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between shadows passing by the window. The next morning, I decided to follow the only lead I had. L. I spent hours flipping through the notebook, searching for anything that could help. There, wedged between lists of names and numbers, was a phone number with just the initial L beside it. My heart hammered as I dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Finally, a voice answered. Low, cautious, genderless. Hello? I hesitated, then said, Yellow tulips. There was a long pause. Who is this? The voice asked, suddenly sharper. I'm Anna, Owen's wife. He told me to trust you, if anything happened. I heard a breath on the other end, ragged and shaky. Where are you? Are you safe? I didn't know how to answer. Not really. Someone's watching us. I found his notebook. He's gone. The line crackled. Listen to me. Pack a bag. Only essentials. Leave your phone. Go to the old train station on 4th. I'll meet you there in 1 hour. The call ended before I could ask another question. I stared at the phone, panic and hope warring in my chest. Was this the help Owen meant, or was I walking into a trap? I woke Emily, telling her we were going on an adventure. She looked at me, her eyes tired and uncertain, but she didn't argue. We packed a bag with clothes, snacks, a few of her favorite things. I wrote a note for Claire, telling her not to worry, that I'd call her soon. I left my phone on the kitchen counter, even though every instinct screamed at me not to. We slipped out the back door and walked quickly, taking side streets, always checking behind us. At the train station, everything felt sharper, more dangerous. The place was mostly abandoned, dust swirling in the morning sun. Emily clung to my hand. A woman appeared from the shadows, tall and thin, with short dark hair and sharp eyes. She looked at me, then at Emily, and nodded. You Anna? I nodded back. You're Elle? She didn't smile. Get in the car. We don't have much time. We climbed into an old sedan, and Elle drove in silence for a while, eyes flicking constantly to the rearview mirror. Finally, she spoke. Owen was supposed to disappear years ago. He got sloppy. He stayed for you. They found him. I felt sick. Who are they? She glanced at me, her jaw clenched. People who don't like loose ends. People Owen used to work for. The words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. I looked at Emily, then back at Elle. What do we do now? Elle pulled into an empty parking lot and turned to face me. You have a choice. Run, start over somewhere new, never look back. Or dig deeper. But if you do, you risk everything. Your life, your daughters. Owen tried to shield you from this. That's why he lied. For a moment, I thought about running, about leaving everything behind and disappearing, just like Owen had done 100 times before. But the anger in me was growing. I was tired of being scared, tired of not knowing the truth. I want answers, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I want to know who he really was, why they're after us. I want to know everything. Elle studied me for a long time, then nodded. All right, but once you start, there's no going back. The car rumbled back to life, and we drove off into the unknown, the world I'd known shrinking behind me, the future unspooling ahead, shadowed and uncertain. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. The next hours blurred together. Highways, cheap motels, gas stations where Elle paid cash for everything. She never used her real name, never stayed in one place for long. At night, she told me bits and pieces of Owen's story. How he'd worked for a group that specialized in quiet solutions, making people disappear, erasing their histories, creating new ones. How he'd gotten out, or tried to, for me, for Emily. He loved you, Elle said quietly. That was his mistake. He believed he could be normal. I tried to imagine Owen as someone else, a man who could erase whole lives, who could lie with every word and still look me in the eye and say, I love you. The pain twisted inside me, sharp and cold. At one motel, while Emily slept, Elle handed me an envelope. Proof, she said. Inside were old photos. Owen in military uniform, Owen with men in suits, Owen holding a baby I didn't recognize. There was a copy of a birth certificate for a man named Daniel Harris. Same birth date as Owen, same face, different name. He changed everything, Elle said. He became who he needed to be. But some things, you can't change. I stared at the photos, at the evidence of a man I'd never really known. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. What happens now? I asked. Elle looked at me, her eyes filled with something like pity. Now, you decide if you want to keep running, or if you want to fight. That night, I lay awake, Emily curled beside me, listening to the hum of the highway outside. My life had been shattered, my heart broken. But somewhere in the darkness, a new resolve began to grow. I would not let them erase us. I would not let my daughter grow up afraid. In the morning, I would choose to fight, even if I had to burn every lie to the ground to find the truth. Women Unwritten. I saw my husband on the news in handcuffs, but when I called the police, they told me he was never real. Part 3. Docs. The morning felt different. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was the clarity that comes from having nothing left to lose. I woke before Emily, blinking at the faded motel wallpaper, the hum of the air conditioner, the sound of Elle's voice low and urgent on her phone outside the door. She was always alert, always scanning the world as if it might suddenly shatter into danger. I admired it in a strange way. I envied it. I got up quietly, careful not to wake Emily, and splashed water on my face in the tiny bathroom. My own reflection startled me. Eyes hollow, jaw set, a woman I barely recognized. Not the PTA mom, not the volunteer or the neighbor always ready with a casserole. Someone harder. Someone who had already lost everything and was now willing to risk the rest. Elle came in as I was toweling off my face. She tossed a bag onto the bed. Change of clothes. Burn the ones you wore yesterday. We can't take chances. Her voice was brisk, but I could hear a note of sympathy under it. I did as she said. As I stuffed the clothes into the trash, I realized how symbolic it was. Shedding my old life, making room for whatever came next. We ate breakfast in silence, stale muffins from the motel lobby, lukewarm coffee. I watched Emily try to act brave, her eyes darting between Elle and me. She was just a kid, and all this terror was swallowing her whole. I tried to catch her eye, to offer her some silent comfort, but she kept her gaze on her hands. After we ate, Elle handed me a cheap prepaid phone. From now on, only use this. No calls to anyone from before. If you need to reach your sister, I'll do it for you. Will you tell me the truth? I asked. Everything? Elle nodded, but I didn't fully trust her. I didn't trust anyone, not anymore. We drove for hours, heading out of the city, through small towns and stretches of nothingness. Elle explained things in fragments, as if she was afraid to say too much. Owen, Daniel, as she sometimes called him, had worked for a private intelligence group. Not the government, not the mob, but something in between. They specialized in making people vanish, in rewriting identities, in fixing problems that couldn't be solved through legal channels. He'd been one of their best, until he met me. I was his mistake, she said, but her eyes were kind when she looked at me. I understood what she meant. Love made people careless. Why did he stay so long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Elle glanced at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. Because he thought he could outrun the past. Because he wanted to believe in you and Emily. He wanted to be someone better. I let that sink in. I wanted to hate him for the lies, but I couldn't. Not entirely. At a roadside diner, Elle finally let me ask questions. I wanted to know everything. How did Owen get involved? Who were the people after us? How could I possibly fight them? She stirred her coffee, her eyes never leaving the window. He got in young, military, special ops. They recruited him for his skills. At first, it was just about erasing people who wanted a new start, witnesses, whistleblowers. Then it got darker. Money, power, secrets. When he tried to get out, they threatened him. The only way to disappear is to become invisible. But he stayed for you. And now, they think you know too much. I felt a wave of nausea. But I don't know anything. It doesn't matter, Elle said. It's what you could know. I stared at my hands, at the little moon-shaped scars on my fingers from years of cooking, gardening, living an ordinary life. I never asked for any of this, but I had it now. No amount of wishing could change that. Elle slid a slip of paper across the table. This is a name, a reporter, one of the few people they haven't gotten to yet. If you want the truth out, she's your best shot. I looked at the name. Maribel Ortiz. The address was in a city 3 hours away. What if they find us first? Elle's jaw tightened. They probably will. That's why we move fast. We drove through the afternoon, Emily asleep in the back seat, clutching her stuffed dog. I watched the landscape blur past, my mind spinning with possibilities. I could run forever, but Emily deserved a real life, not a shadow one. She deserved to know the truth about her father, even if it was ugly. As we reached the city, Elle parked in a public garage and led us through winding side streets to a small, cluttered office above a laundromat. Maribel Ortiz looked nothing like I expected. She was small, with wild gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She listened as I told my story, halting, uncertain, desperate for her to believe me. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and let out a long, low whistle. You realize how insane this sounds, right? I nodded, holding out Owen's notebook and the photographs. She examined them, her fingers gentle on the pages. I've heard rumors, she said quietly. Whispers about this group. No names, no proof. If what you're saying is true, you're in more danger than you know. I don't want protection, I said. I want the truth. I want Emily to be safe. Can you help us? Maribel's gaze softened. I'll try. But you need to disappear, at least until I can figure out who's pulling the strings. Elle agreed. We'll lay low. You dig. As we left, Maribel pressed a burner phone into my hand. If anyone contacts you, don't answer unless they use the phrase, red sky at morning. If they don't say it, hang up. And Anna, trust no one. Back at the motel, Elle checked the parking lot twice before letting us out. Emily was quiet, her eyes shadowed. I lay on the bed beside her, brushing her hair off her face. She looked at me with a question she was too scared to ask. I tried to give her what little comfort I could. Your dad loved you. Whatever happens, we'll get through this together. She nodded, pressing her face into my shoulder. That night, I dreamed of Owen, standing at the edge of a cliff, calling to me, but I couldn't reach him. I woke up gasping, my heart thudding. Elle was sitting by the window, watching the street. Trouble? She said quietly. A car was parked down the block, lights off, engine running, the same white van from before. My blood ran cold. We have to go, Elle whispered, shoving clothes and passports into a bag. She woke Emily, who came awake instantly, her eyes wide with terror, but not a single tear. We slipped out the back, through an alley thick with the smell of garbage and rain. Elle led us to a battered old pickup she'd stashed nearby. We drove for hours, taking back roads, never stopping for more than a few minutes at a time. I felt hunted, like an animal. I could see the fear in Emily's eyes, the exhaustion in the set of Elle's jaw. At dawn, we pulled into a rest stop, and Elle finally spoke. "You have a choice. We can keep running, or we can set a trap." "A trap?" I echoed, my voice brittle. Elle nodded. "If we leak just enough information, we can draw them out. Maribel can help, but it's risky." I thought of Emily, of Claire, of all the people who might be caught in the crossfire. But I was done hiding. "Let's do it," I said. "Let's end this." Elle's mouth quirked in something like a smile. "That's what I thought you'd say." The next few days were a blur of planning. Maribel called, using the phrase, "red sky at morning," her voice tense. "I found something. One of Owen's old contacts, a man named Vasquez. He knows more, but he's scared. He'll only talk if you meet him, alone." Alone. The word rattled in my chest. But if this was the only way, I'd do it. Elle and I argued. She wanted to go in my place, but Vasquez insisted on me. "He won't talk to anyone else," Maribel said. The meeting was set for a busy park, midday, crowds everywhere. I wore a hat and sunglasses, my hands clammy as I waited on a bench. Vasquez arrived late, nervous, eyes darting everywhere. "You Anna?" he whispered, sliding onto the bench beside me. I nodded. He pressed a folder into my hands. "They'll kill me if they know I talked. Inside, proof, names, dates, everything Owen did, everything they did to keep it hidden." I wanted to ask more, but he was gone, melting into the crowd. My hands shook as I opened the folder. Inside were pages and pages of documents, contracts, photographs, even a grainy picture of Owen with men I recognized from the news, men who'd vanished without a trace. As I walked back toward the exit, a man in a dark suit stepped into my path. He smiled, but his eyes were dead. "Anna Taylor," he said, "you've been looking for answers. Some stones are better left unturned." I froze, my breath coming in shallow gasps. He leaned in, voice low. "You have one chance. Walk away now, or you and your daughter disappear forever." He melted away before I could reply. I hurried back to the car, the folder pressed to my chest like a shield. Back at the motel, Elle read the documents with grim satisfaction. "This is enough to bring them down, but it'll put a target on your back the size of Texas." Emily looked at me, fear and trust mingled in her eyes. "What are we going to do, Mom?" I hugged her close. "We're going to finish what your father started. We're going to make sure no one else has to live like this." I didn't know if I believed it, but for the first time, I felt something close to hope, sharp and bright, cutting through the darkness. I was no longer just Owen's wife or the woman left behind. I was Anna, and I was ready to fight. Women Unwritten. I saw my husband on the news in handcuffs, but when I called the police, they told me he was never real. Part 4, Docs. There's a moment in every nightmare where you realize you're awake, and this is real. No waking up, no escaping. That's what the days felt like after Vasquez handed me that folder. I carried it everywhere, afraid to let it out of my sight, terrified of what would happen if it fell into the wrong hands. Inside, Owen's past unfurled in page after page of secrets. Government contracts, names of vanished people, money trails looping through shell companies and dead ends. There were photos of men and women whose faces I recognized from old headlines. Scandals, sudden disappearances, never any answers. And in all of it, Owen's name appeared like a ghost. Sometimes as Daniel Harris, sometimes as M. Taylor, always just out of focus. Elle was relentless, digging through the documents night after night, piecing together a picture of a world that was bigger and colder than I'd ever imagined. She barely slept, barely ate, pushing herself to the edge. I watched her from across the cheap motel room, the blue light from her laptop painting shadows under her eyes. Every so often, she'd curse softly, scribbling notes or snapping photos with her burner phone to send to Maribel. Emily tried to keep busy with homework and TV, but I could see how the fear was eating at her. She jumped at every noise, flinched when I left the room. One night, she came to me in tears, clutching her stuffed dog so tight I thought it might tear. "Are we ever going home?" she whispered. I wrapped her in my arms, burying my face in her hair, trying not to let her hear the tremor in my voice. "Someday, sweetheart, but not until it's safe." "But what if it's never safe?" she asked, her voice so small it broke my heart. I didn't have an answer, so I just held her, feeling the weight of every secret Owen had carried and every lie I now had to bear for Emily's sake. Maribel kept us updated in short, coded calls. "Red sky at morning," she'd say, and my heart would leap into my throat, wondering if this would be the call where she told us to run again. Instead, she told us the folder had names that scared even her: senators, CEOs, a judge who'd vanished after a corruption scandal. She said, "This is more than a story. It's a bomb. If we drop it, we can't control where the shrapnel lands." I asked her if she was scared. She laughed, a hard, bitter sound. "Scared? I've been scared for 20 years. But I'm also tired. These people can't keep writing their own rules forever." Elle and Maribel developed a plan. We'd make digital copies of the files, scatter them in a dozen places: newsrooms, advocacy groups, people who couldn't be bribed or bullied. If anything happened to us, everything would go public. "It was insurance," Elle said. "It was the only thing that might keep us alive." But nothing felt safe anymore. Not when the white van reappeared, parked half a block from the motel. Not when I started noticing the same faces at every gas station, every diner. Men with too clean shoes and empty eyes. Elle moved us 3 more times, always at night, always quick and silent. I learned to pack in minutes, to sleep in my clothes, to keep Emily's shoes by the bed. One evening, as the sun was setting and the sky burned orange, Elle came in from a call with Maribel, her face pale and tense. "They know where we are," she said. "We have to leave, now." We threw everything into bags and ran, hearts pounding, Emily clutching her dog in my hand, Elle leading us through the back alleys to her battered pickup. As we pulled away, I looked back and saw 2 men standing outside the motel, watching, their faces expressionless. We drove for hours, heading into the mountains, the roads twisting and empty. Finally, Elle pulled over at a rest stop, her hands trembling on the wheel. "They're closing in. We need to disappear, really disappear. New names, new lives. But you have to decide. Do we release everything now, or wait for Maribel's go-ahead?" I thought of Emily, sleeping in the back seat, her face soft and innocent despite everything. I thought of Owen, and the man he'd tried so hard to become. I knew what I had to do. "We wait," I said. "We trust Maribel. We do this right." Elle nodded, relief flickering across her face. "Good, because if we screw this up, they'll bury us, and the truth with us." The next days blurred together. Cheap motels, fast food, always looking over our shoulders. Elle taught me how to spot a tail, how to change our appearance with thrift store clothes and box dye. She showed me how to use the prepaid phones, how to hide evidence of our presence. I learned to move quietly, to keep my head down. I became invisible. But the strain wore on all of us. Emily stopped speaking, except in whispers. I caught her crying in the bathroom, silent and shaking. I started writing letters to her, just in case. Letters I hid in the lining of her backpack, telling her I loved her, telling her none of this was her fault. One afternoon, Maribel called. "Red sky at morning. We're almost ready. But Anna, you need to do one thing for me. You need to talk to Claire." My heart twisted. Claire had called dozens of times, left voicemails that I couldn't bear to listen to. I'd sent her a single text. "We're safe, I promise," but nothing more. "Now," Maribel insisted. "If something happens to you, she needs to know where to find Emily. It's not fair, but it's necessary. Elle agreed, so I called Claire, my voice shaking, my eyes filling with tears at the sound of hers. She'd been frantic, calling hospitals, harassing the police, refusing to believe I'd just run away. I told her as much as I could, that Owen was gone, that we were in danger, that I couldn't explain yet. I gave her a code word, something only she and I would know. If anyone else called pretending to be me, she'd know the difference. "I love you, Claire," I said, my voice breaking. "Tell Mom I'm sorry. I'll explain everything when I can." She cried, begged me to come home, but I knew I couldn't. Not yet. The final piece fell into place when Maribel called again, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. "It's time. We leak everything tonight. I need you to send the last files from a public computer. That way, if anyone traces it, it won't come back to you." Elle drove us into the city under cover of darkness. I left Emily with her in the car and walked into a grimy internet cafe, heart pounding. I uploaded the files to Maribel and her contacts, newsrooms, lawyers, even an international watchdog group. I felt exposed, vulnerable, every second spent at that computer stretching into eternity. When it was done, I walked out into the night, my hands shaking. Back in the car, Elle started the engine, her jaw tight. "Now we wait." The next morning, the world exploded. Every news channel, every website, every radio station was talking about the leak, about the mysterious files that exposed decades of corruption, disappearances, and the shadowy group that made it all possible. Photos of Owen, my Owen, flashed across the screen, alongside senators, CEOs, even that missing judge. The phone rang nonstop, numbers I didn't recognize, reporters desperate for a quote. But there was no going back now. We'd lit the fuse. All we could do was run and hope the world was paying attention. That night, as Emily slept beside me and Elle sat by the window with her gun in her lap, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe Owen had been right to trust me. Maybe love wasn't the mistake, but the thing that had finally brought the truth to light. But deep down, I knew we weren't safe yet. There was still a reckoning to come, and I would face it, whatever it brought, for Emily, for Owen, for all the women who'd ever been left in the dark. Women unwritten. I saw my husband on the news in handcuffs. But when I called the police, they told me he was never real. Part 5. Docs. I didn't expect the world to change overnight, but the next morning, I could feel something shifting. The silence that had always surrounded Owen's secrets had been shattered, replaced by a noise I couldn't control. News anchors reading out lists of names, headlines screaming about government cover-ups, endless speculation about the mysterious woman who'd set everything in motion. My face wasn't on the news, but I recognized myself in every story. Anonymous source leaks files tied to national scandal. Who is the whistleblower's family? I kept the TV low and the curtains drawn. Emily pressed close to me, her eyes darting to the screen every time a new photo appeared. She'd grown quieter, older somehow, over these past weeks. Some days I barely recognized her, and I wondered if I'd ever forgive Owen for what he'd stolen from her. But I also wondered if, in a strange way, this was the only gift he could give her. The truth, finally out in the open, even if it came with a cost. Elle paced the room, phone in hand, talking in clipped tones to Maribel and her other contacts. She'd grown even more tense since the leak, her movements sharp, eyes always scanning the shadows. She told me, "This is when they get desperate. Be ready for anything." The gun stayed in her lap, always within reach. I tried to focus on practical things, packing, planning, making sure Emily ate. But fear had a way of worming into everything. Every knock on the door, every car idling outside, sent my pulse racing. Even the sound of Elle's voice made me jump sometimes, though I trusted her more than anyone now. She was the only one who'd never lied to me. That evening, Maribel called. "It's everywhere, Anna. They're running scared. Some of those names are already in custody, others are trying to cut deals. But you need to know, there are people who want you silenced. I have sources in law enforcement who say your face is circulating on private networks. You and Emily need to disappear for real. Not for a week or a month. For as long as it takes. I tried to swallow my fear. We can't run forever. Maribel's voice softened. No, but you can run long enough for the world to change around you. Long enough for them to lose their grip. I'll keep feeding stories. I'll keep the pressure on. But you have to promise me you'll stay safe. I promised, though I didn't know what that meant anymore. Elle made arrangements. New documents, new names, new lives. She burned everything that connected us to our old selves. Old photos, receipts, anything with our handwriting. She even made Emily choose a new birthday. Emily picked July 4th, her voice flat, but her eyes shining for just a moment with something like defiance. We're free now, right? She asked as we packed the last of our things. I knelt beside her, brushing her hair back. Not yet, honey, but soon. That night, we left the city. Elle drove for hours, taking back roads, never stopping in the same place twice. She'd planned everything, fake IDs, cash, even a car registered under a name that meant nothing to me. We headed west, toward the ocean, the landscape changing from gray city blocks to rolling hills and redwoods. I watched the scenery blur by and tried to let go of the life behind us. But the past wasn't finished with me yet. We stopped at a small coastal town, a place so quiet it felt like the world had forgotten it. Elle found us a rental, an old cottage with creaking floors and a view of the water. She set up new phones, new routines. Emily started at a local school under her new name. I got a job at a bakery, working early mornings while the sky was still dark. I baked bread and listened to the radio, waiting for any sign that the storm was over. For a few weeks, it almost felt normal. Emily made a friend, a shy girl named Grace, who lived down the lane. She started smiling again, just a little. We built sandcastles on the beach and made pancakes for dinner. Sometimes, I'd catch Elle watching us from the porch, her eyes soft, as if she was remembering something from her own lost life. But the fear never really left. I still scanned every face in the grocery store, still checked the locks 3 times before bed. I taught Emily to be careful, to never answer questions from strangers, to never say our real names. One afternoon, as I was wiping down tables at the bakery, a man came in, a stranger, but not quite. He was tall, with a scar along his jaw, and something about the way he looked at me made my stomach twist. He ordered coffee, then lingered by the counter, watching me with cold, assessing eyes. When he finally spoke, it was in a low voice, meant only for me. You're hard to find, Anna. Or should I say, Sarah now? I froze, the cloth slipping from my hand. I'm sorry. You must have me confused with someone else. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They're not done with you. You should leave. Tonight. He turned and walked out, the bell above the door jangling in his wake. I stood there, heart pounding, until the room spun around me. That night, I told Elle everything. She listened without interrupting, then nodded. We move. Now. Emily didn't argue when I woke her, didn't even cry. She just packed her things and hugged Grace goodbye, whispering promises to write that I knew she'd never be able to keep. We left the cottage before sunrise, driving until the roads turned to dust and the radio faded into static. We kept moving, never staying more than a night in one place. I watched Emily grow quieter again, watched the light fade from her eyes. I started to wonder if I'd done the right thing, if telling the truth was worth the cost it demanded from her. But every time I doubted, I remembered the folder, the photos, the women and children whose faces haunted the news now, finally seen after so many years in the dark. Then, one evening, Elle got a call from Maribel. Red sky at morning, she said, her voice tight. Some of the worst are being indicted. The story's not dying. But Anna, you need to know, Owen's still alive. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. What do you mean, alive? I saw him on the news. I saw him in handcuffs. I know, but that footage, they think it was staged. He's not in custody. Someone's helping him, but I don't know who. Be careful. If he tries to contact you, don't trust him. Not yet. I hung up, my mind spinning. All this time, I'd imagined Owen dead or locked away. I'd mourned him, hated him, forgiven him in 1,000 different ways. But the idea that he was out there, somewhere, alive and running, made my heart ache in ways I didn't know were possible. Elle watched me carefully. What will you do if he calls? I didn't have an answer. I didn't trust Owen anymore, but I couldn't let go of the hope that he'd tell me something, anything, that would make sense of the chaos he'd left behind. That night, as I lay awake in another nameless motel, Emily's breathing soft beside me, I let myself remember the man I'd loved. The man who made me laugh, who held my hand through every storm, who told me stories late at night when I couldn't sleep. I remembered his smile, his warmth, the way he whispered, "You're safe now," when I needed to hear it most. But I also remembered the lies, the secrets, the look in his eyes when he thought I wasn't watching. I didn't know what I'd do if he called. I only knew that if he did, I'd finally get to ask him all the questions that had been burning inside me since the morning I saw him on the news. And maybe, just maybe, I'd get the truth, or as much of it as he was willing to give. Women Unwritten. I saw my husband on the news in handcuffs, but when I called the police, they told me he was never real. Part 6. Docs. The next days stretched out, each one longer than the last, the hours thick with questions I couldn't ask, and answers I was afraid to find. I watched Emily sleep, watched Elle pace, watched the world spin on without us. Trials, arrests, the nightly news full of faces I'd seen in Owen's folder. But beneath the surface, I could feel something shifting, some current drawing us closer to the heart of everything we'd been running from. We kept moving, small towns, highway motels, places so anonymous they barely felt real. Elle had contacts everywhere, people who owed her favors or remembered old loyalties. She'd disappear for hours, coming back with supplies, sometimes with news. She was careful, but I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way she listened for footsteps in every hallway. I knew what it cost her, keeping us safe. One morning, as Emily and I ate cereal in silence, Elle came in holding a prepaid phone. "It's for you," she said, her voice unreadable. "Don't say your name. Don't answer questions unless you hear the phrase." My heart pounded as I pressed the phone to my ear. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice, quiet, roughened by exhaustion. Owen's voice. "Red sky at morning, Anna. It's me." I couldn't speak. My throat closed around all the things I'd wanted to say, all the questions and accusations and grief. He spoke first, the words tumbling out. "I'm sorry. I never wanted this for you or Emily. They're after me, but you're not safe either. There's someone inside, someone helping them find you. I don't know who. Don't trust anyone, not even Elle. Especially not Elle." I almost dropped the phone. Elle, standing by the window, watched me carefully. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Why should I believe you?" He sighed, a sound full of regret. "Because I never lied about loving you. But Elle has her own agenda. She always has. She worked for them before she worked for me." My hands shook. "Where are you?" "Far away. I can't risk coming to you, not yet. But you have to run. Change everything. I'll send you a new safe word. Use it if you need to contact me. I'll find you when it's over." The line went dead. I stood there, numb, the phone heavy in my hand. Elle came over, her eyes sharp, searching. "What did he say?" I thought about Owen's warning, the years I'd spent trusting the wrong person. I looked at Elle, at the worry in her face, at the way she watched me as if waiting for a sign. "He said he loves us," I lied, tucking the phone away. He said we should keep running. Elle seemed to relax, just a fraction. But I felt the ground shift beneath me. For the first time, I wondered if I'd ever really known anyone. Not Owen, not Elle, maybe not even myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, turning Owen's words over in my mind, wondering what to believe. Elle had saved us, protected us, risked her life for us. But she was also ruthless, secretive, always one step ahead. I remembered the way she'd found us that first day, the way she'd never told me her real name, the way she always seemed to know what would happen before it did. I started to notice little things. How Elle locked her own bag, never let me see what was inside. How she took calls outside, always in whispers. How she never talked about her own past, only about Owen's. I tried to push the doubts aside, but they crept in at the edges, turning every kindness into something I had to question. A few days later, Maribel called with a warning. "They're moving again, Anna. Someone's leaking information about your location. Are you sure you trust everyone you're with?" I tried to sound calm. "Yes, I think so." She hesitated. "I'm sending you new contacts. Use them if you have to. Don't tell anyone you don't trust." After I hung up, I found Elle sitting outside, staring at the sky. I joined her, searching her face for some sign of what was true. "Why are you helping us?" I asked, finally. She looked at me, her eyes tired. "Because someone has to. Because I owed Owen a debt. Because I was part of that world once, and I want out." "Why did you leave?" I pressed. She hesitated, then shrugged. "I lost someone. I thought I could make it right by saving someone else." I wanted to believe her. I wanted it so badly, I almost convinced myself it was true. But doubt is a stubborn thing. It settles in your bones and refuses to be shaken loose. That night, I searched Elle's bag while she showered. My hands trembled as I unzipped it, afraid of what I'd find. Inside was a gun, a stack of cash, 2 passports, one with her face, one with mine. The name on mine wasn't the one she'd given me for the new IDs. There was also a phone I hadn't seen before, locked with a code. I put everything back the way I'd found it, my heart racing. When Elle came out, I pretended to be asleep. The next morning, as we were packing to leave, Emily found something, a slip of paper folded into her math book. She handed it to me, her eyes wide. It was a note, written in Owen's blocky handwriting. "Trust no one but yourself. The password is Starling. Don't let them take Emily." I felt the blood drain from my face. Elle saw it, her eyes narrowing. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said quickly, shoving the note into my pocket. "Just a page from one of Emily's old workbooks." We left the motel and drove for hours, the silence between us heavy and sharp. At the next stop, I waited until Elle went inside for coffee, then pulled out her locked phone. I tried the password, Starling. It opened. Inside were messages, hundreds of them, some from numbers I didn't recognize, others from people I thought were on our side. There were updates on our movements, locations, even photos of Emily and me. The last message was from a number labeled Director. It read, "Deliver the package within 72 hours or it's over. No loose ends." I felt sick. Package. That's what we were to them. Cargo, leverage, evidence. When Elle returned, I confronted her. My voice shook, but I didn't back down. "Who are you working for, really?" She didn't deny it. She just looked at me, her eyes full of something I couldn't name. "I tried to protect you, Anna, but I can't fight them all. I thought if I delivered you safely, maybe they'd let us both go." "You lied to me. You used us." She nodded, her jaw clenched. "I'm sorry. I really am." I backed away, pulling Emily behind me. "We're leaving. Now." Elle didn't try to stop us. She just watched, her face hollow with regret. Emily and I left everything behind. Bags, clothes, the life we'd built out of scraps. I took only the phone, Owen's notes, and my daughter's hand. We walked until my feet bled, flagged down a bus, and rode for hours to the edge of nowhere. I didn't know where Owen was, or who to trust, or what would happen next. But for the first time, I was making the decisions. For Emily. For myself. We were alone again, fugitives in a world that had never wanted us. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry, and I was done being anyone's package, anyone's pawn. That night, as Emily slept beside me on a bench in a bus station, I whispered a promise into her hair. No more running, no more hiding. We're going to finish this, our way. In the darkness, I clung to the hope that Owen would find us, that the truth would finally set us free. Or if not, that I would forge a new truth, one that belonged only to us. Women Unwritten. I saw my husband on the news in handcuffs, but when I called the police, they told me he was never real. Part 7. Docks. The bus station was colder than I remembered any building ever being. Emily's head rested on my lap, her breathing steady but fragile, as if she might wake at the slightest tremor of fear in me. I kept my eyes open all night, listening for footsteps, voices, the jangle of keys. Every noise made my heart jump, but no one came. For the first time in weeks, the world was eerily silent. At dawn, I bought us 2 tickets to a town I picked at random, a place with a name so plain, it might as well have been a blank page. We rode in silence, the bus rattling through empty highways and tiny towns. I watched Emily watch the world outside, her face pressed to the glass, her reflection a ghost beside the fields. I wondered what she was thinking. If she hated me, if she missed Owen, if she'd ever feel safe again. We got off in a place where the air smelled like rain and wood smoke, and the streets were empty except for a stray dog and an old man sweeping his porch. I used the little cash I had left for a room in a rundown motel, the kind where the clerk doesn't ask questions. I paid extra for privacy, and the relief in his eyes told me he saw desperate women more often than he'd ever admit. I tried to piece together a plan. My mind went in circles. We couldn't call Claire, not yet. I didn't trust Maribel anymore, not after seeing how easily Elle had fooled us all. The only thing I had was Owen's note and the phone, the password Starling still burned into my brain. I stared at the messages, reading them over and over, hoping for some hidden meaning. The last message from Owen's number came at midnight, just as I was about to give up hope of ever hearing from him again. The phone vibrated softly in my hand, the screen lighting up with a simple text. Window, 5 minutes. I looked at Emily, sleeping deeply, then crept to the window and peered through the faded curtains. The parking lot was empty except for a battered blue sedan. The driver's side door opened, and a figure stepped out, tall and thin, moving like someone who'd spent a lifetime looking over his shoulder. He kept to the shadows, but I knew that walk. My heart nearly stopped. I slipped on my shoes and left the room, closing the door quietly behind me. The night air was sharp, full of the promise of rain. I walked toward the car, every step heavier than the last. He waited in the shadows, hands shoved deep in his pockets, face gaunt and older, but still so achingly familiar. Owen. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to run to him, to scream, to hit him, to ask 1,000 questions all at once. He spoke first, voice low and raw. You shouldn't have come. It's not safe. Anger flared in me, fierce and sudden. Not safe? After everything you did, you're worried about my safety now? He looked away, shame written in every line of his face. I never wanted this. I thought I could protect you, even from myself. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that love could survive this many betrayals. Why did you lie to me? About who you were? About everything? He sighed, a sound full of regret and exhaustion. Because I was afraid. Afraid they'd find you, use you against me. Afraid you'd leave if you knew the truth. What truth, Owen? That you're a criminal? A spy? That you made people disappear? His eyes flashed, a shadow of the man I used to know. I did what I had to do. For years, it was just a job. Then I met you and everything changed. I thought I could have both, a normal life and a clean conscience. I was wrong. I wanted to scream, to shake him. Instead, I whispered, Emily deserves better. She deserves the truth. He nodded, his voice breaking. I know. That's why I'm here. He handed me a flash drive, small and unremarkable, but I could feel the weight of it in my palm. Everything's on there. The files, the names, the real story. The people who are still out there, the ones who want you gone. It's enough to finish what we started, but it's also dangerous. If you use it, you have to disappear for good. I stared at the flash drive, my mind racing. Why now? Why trust me now? He looked at me, his eyes shining with tears. Because you're braver than I ever was. Because you never gave up, even when I would have. I'm tired of running, Anna. I want you and Emily to have a chance, even if it means I never see you again. My anger faded, replaced by a grief so deep it felt like drowning. I remembered our wedding day, the way he'd looked at me like I was the only thing in the world. I remembered Emily's first steps, the nights we spent talking until dawn, the laughter, the small moments of happiness that now felt like fragments from another life. I looked at him one last time, searching for the man I'd loved. Will I ever see you again? He shook his head, pain twisting his features. Not in this life, but maybe in another. He turned and walked away, swallowed by the darkness. I stood there for a long time, clutching the flash drive, feeling both utterly lost and, for the first time in months, finally in control. Back in the room, I watched Emily sleep, her face peaceful for once. I wanted to keep her there forever, frozen in that moment of innocence. But I knew I couldn't. The world was waiting, dangerous and unkind, but it was ours now to face on our terms. The next morning, I made a decision. I found a library in town, a battered old building with creaky floors, and a librarian who didn't ask questions. I sat at a computer, hands shaking as I plugged in the flash drive. The files loaded, a mountain of evidence, video, audio, names and dates, a roadmap of everything Owen had ever done and everyone who'd ever wanted us dead. It was overwhelming, but it was also our weapon. I made copies, encrypted them, sent them to Maribel, to every reporter I could find, to advocacy groups, to government watchdogs. I included a letter, my story, Emily's story, the truth about Owen, about Elle, about the people who had ruined so many lives and tried to erase ours. I didn't care if I became the story. I just wanted it out. All of it. Then I destroyed the flash drive, burned every paper, wiped the computer. There would be no more evidence left to find. When I got back to the motel, Emily was waiting by the window. She looked at me, fear and hope warring in her eyes. Are we safe now? She whispered. I knelt beside her, holding her hands in mine. We might never be completely safe, honey, but we're free, and no one will ever use us again. That night, we packed what little we had and slipped away under the cover of darkness, just as the first drops of rain began to fall. I didn't know where we were going, only that it would be somewhere new, somewhere that belonged to us alone. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt alive, frightened, scarred, but alive. Emily curled against me on the bus, her hand in mine, her breathing slow and steady. I watched the world slide by outside, and for the first time, I allowed myself to believe in something like hope. The past would always be with us, a shadow at our heels, but we were no longer running from it. We were walking into whatever came next, together. Women Unwritten. I saw my husband on the news in handcuffs, but when I called the police, They told me he was never real. Part 8. Docks. The next town was smaller still, a place where no one looked twice at a tired mother and her daughter stepping off a bus with nothing but a duffel bag. We checked into a room above the only diner in town, 2 beds, a leaky window, and the faded scent of fried onions in the air. I paid cash. The owner, a woman with kind eyes and a voice like gravel, handed me a real key, not a card, and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Nobody finds you here unless you want them to." For the first time, I almost believed it. I let Emily sleep as long as she wanted that first day. She needed rest, a chance to be a kid again, even just for a few hours. I watched her breathing, her lashes fluttering against her cheek, and wondered how many more times I'd get to see her this peaceful before the world intruded again. She woke hungry, so we went downstairs to the diner, where the woman behind the counter, her name was Alma, poured us hot chocolate with extra whipped cream. Emily smiled, a real smile, for the first time in weeks. I almost cried with relief. We settled into a routine. I found work washing dishes for Alma. Long hours, hard work, but honest and anonymous. Emily started at the local school, her 4th in as many months, but here the kids were gentle, and the teachers didn't ask too many questions. I was careful, always. I kept to myself, didn't use our real names, never let Emily walk home alone. I checked the locks each night, watched for strange cars, let no one get close. But in the quiet moments, when the sun poured through the window and I heard Emily's laughter drift up from the street, I allowed myself to hope that maybe we'd found a sliver of normal. I kept up with the news as best I could. Radio at dawn, old newspapers, the diner TV with its fuzzy reception. The story I'd unleashed was everywhere. Arrests, resignations, government hearings. The world seemed to be tearing itself apart over the secrets Owen and I had exposed. The coverage painted me as everything from a villain, to a hero, to a ghost. Sometimes I wondered which one was closest to the truth. A letter arrived one day, addressed to my latest alias, but inside was a note in Maribel's handwriting. "You did it. Some are paying, more will. It's not over, but you're not alone. There are others, and you gave them courage. Be careful. They're still looking." She'd enclosed a clipping from a national paper, a photograph of me and Emily, blurred and grainy, under the headline, "Whistleblower's Family Still Missing." There was a number to call if anyone saw us. I burned the letter and the clipping in the sink, watching the ashes swirl down the drain. But the message stayed with me. I wasn't alone. Others had come forward, women, mostly, telling their stories, shining light in all the places men like Owen's bosses had kept hidden. For the first time, I felt like a part of something bigger, not just a frightened woman on the run. Life settled into a rhythm. I found comfort in small routines, folding napkins, filling ketchup bottles, listening to Alma's stories about her late husband and her wild years in the city. Alma never pried, never judged. She just let me be. Some nights, after the diner closed, she'd pour us both coffee and talk about survival, about the women who built the world in the spaces men left behind. I listened, soaking in her wisdom, letting it patch the holes in my heart. Emily made friends, real friends, for the first time in ages. She brought them home for peanut butter sandwiches, filling our tiny room with laughter. She began to draw again, pictures of boats and houses, and once, a family of 3 standing beneath a blue sky. She never drew Owen's face, but I saw the shadow of him in her smile. One afternoon, as I was closing up the kitchen, Alma pressed an envelope into my hand. "Someone left this for you," she said, her eyes searching mine. Inside was a single piece of paper, typewritten. "The world is watching. You're safer now, but never safe. Trust yourself. Trust no one else. If you need help, use the word Starling." There was no signature. I stared at the note, the old fear crawling back. I checked the street that night, watched for strange faces, kept Emily close. But nothing happened. Days passed, then weeks, and the note faded to the bottom of my bag, a relic of a life I was trying to leave behind. But safety, I learned, is always an illusion. It happened on a Saturday, in the middle of the lunch rush. I was elbow deep in suds, humming along to the radio, when I saw the police cruiser pull up outside the diner. 2 officers got out, faces unreadable behind mirrored sunglasses. I dried my hands and forced myself to walk out front, heart hammering. "Can I help you?" I asked, hoping my voice didn't shake. They looked at me, then at the old newspaper clipping one of them held in his hand. "We're looking for someone, a woman and a girl. Have you seen them?" I forced myself to glance at the photo, to shake my head, to play the part I'd practiced so many times. "Sorry, lots of new folks passing through lately, but I don't know them." They didn't push, just thanked me and left, but I watched them drive away, memorizing their plates, waiting for the other shoe to drop. That night, I packed a bag and told Emily we might have to leave again. She nodded, eyes old beyond her years, but she didn't cry. But the police didn't return. Alma didn't ask questions. Instead, she made us pancakes for dinner and let Emily help in the kitchen. Later, she squeezed my hand and said, "You're safe here, as long as you need." For the first time, I let myself believe her. Maybe the world would always be dangerous. Maybe we would always be looking over our shoulders. But here, in this small, forgotten town, we'd found something like peace. I tried to let go of the guilt, the anger, the ache of missing Owen. I tried to be a mother again, not just a guardian. I tried to laugh with Emily, to share her hopes and her fears, to build a new story for us out of the ashes of the old one. Some nights, I still dreamed of the past, of Owen's eyes, of Elle's betrayals, of all the lives we'd touched and changed and lost. But most mornings, I woke to the sound of Emily's laughter and the smell of fresh coffee, and I was grateful. Grateful for survival. Grateful for the women who'd helped us. Grateful for the chance, however fleeting, to write our own story at last. Women Unwritten. I saw my husband on the news in handcuffs, but when I called the police, they told me he was never real. Part 9. Docs. The days blurred into one another, ordinary in their small ways, but precious beyond measure. Emily thrived, her cheeks rounder, her laughter easier, her eyes bright again. I watched her on the playground after school, running with her new friends, not glancing over her shoulder the way she used to. I held on to those moments tightly, tucking them away for the harder days I knew might still come. I tried to build something real for us. We painted our tiny room a cheerful yellow and filled the windowsills with wildflowers. I bought Emily books at the thrift store, and we read every night, stories about girls who survived storms and found their way home. Sometimes I caught her drawing pictures of houses with smoke curling from the chimneys and families standing together at the door. She never asked about Owen anymore, but I saw the questions in her drawings, the empty place beside us, the shadow of someone she still missed. Alma became like family. She taught me how to make her famous pies, trusted me with her recipes, and let Emily help fold napkins or sprinkle cinnamon on apple slices. She never pushed for more than I could give, but she always knew when to offer a gentle word or a warm embrace. In her kitchen, I found a piece of myself I thought I'd lost, a woman who could laugh, who could hope, who could look forward instead of back. But the past never really lets go. One evening, as I was walking home from the store with Emily, a man stepped from the shadows near the alley beside the diner. My heart froze. For a split second, I thought I recognized the shape of him, the way he held himself, the set of his shoulders. But when he stepped into the light, I realized I'd never seen him before. He was younger than Owen, clean-cut, with eyes that never quite met mine. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Anna? Or do you go by something else now?" I felt Emily's grip tighten on my hand. I kept my voice steady, the way Elle had taught me. "I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong person." He glanced at Emily, then back at me. "You did the right thing, you know. The world needed your story." He looked around, lowering his voice. But some people aren't so forgiving. You need to be careful. I stood my ground, refusing to let him see my fear. Are you threatening us? He shook his head, almost gentle. No, I'm warning you. There are still people looking, people who lost everything because of what you did. If you ever need help, use the word starling. Someone will come. He slipped away as quickly as he'd appeared, swallowed by the shadows and the drizzle that had started to fall. I held Emily close all the way home, my heart pounding. That night, I sat awake while Emily slept, replaying the encounter. I thought about all the times I'd wanted to run, all the times I'd wanted to stop fighting. I thought about Owen, about Elle, about Maribel and Alma, and every woman whose life had been twisted by secrets, and men who thought themselves untouchable. I realized I wasn't running anymore. I was choosing to stay, to risk, to hope. The next morning, I told Alma everything. She listened in silence, her eyes sad but not surprised. When I finished, she hugged me tight and said, "You're braver than you think, but you don't have to be alone. Not here." Her words gave me strength. I decided not to hide anymore. I started volunteering at Emily's school, joining the parent committee, letting people know the version of myself I was becoming. I taught Emily to ride a bike, to bake pies, to write her own stories. We planted a garden behind the diner, tomatoes, beans, wildflowers that grew in riotous color. The news moved on. The headlines faded, replaced by new scandals and new tragedies. But every so often, another story would appear, another woman coming forward, another injustice brought into the light. Sometimes I got letters, unsigned, thanking me for giving them the courage to speak up. I kept those letters in a box under my bed, reminders that the truth had mattered. Emily asked one night, as I tucked her in, "Are we ever going to go back to our old life?" I brushed her hair from her forehead. "I don't think so, sweetheart, but that's okay. Sometimes you have to let go of what's gone so you can build something better." She nodded, already half asleep, and whispered, "I like it here. I like who we are now." I kissed her goodnight, my heart aching with love and pride. As the seasons changed, so did we. The sharp edges of fear wore down to something softer, something manageable. I still checked the locks at night, still watched for strange cars. But I also learned to open the windows, to let the breeze carry away the memories that hurt too much to hold. Sometimes I dreamed of Owen, sometimes as the man I'd loved, sometimes as the stranger I'd lost. In those dreams, he always told me the same thing. "You're free, Anna. Live." And for the first time, I believed him. Women Unwritten. I saw my husband on the news in handcuffs, but when I called the police, they told me he was never real. Part 10, Docs. Spring crept into the town quietly, softening the edges of winter and leaving the scent of lilacs on every breeze. Emily and I planted seeds in the patch behind the diner, tiny green promises that life keeps going, no matter how bruised the soil. She pressed each one into the earth with careful fingers, whispering wishes I couldn't quite hear, and I watched her, grateful and aching and fiercely proud. In the evenings, after the rush at the diner faded and Alma counted the days till, I'd walk Emily home beneath a sky-streaked gold and blue. Neighbors would wave, dogs would bark, and for a few steps, it all felt unremarkable. Just a mother and daughter heading home. The kind of life I'd once thought was ordinary, before I learned how precious ordinary could be. I still carried the past with me. Some nights, sleep wouldn't come, and I'd sit by the window, watching headlights crawl along distant roads, wondering if anyone out there still cared enough to come searching. I kept Owen's last note tucked in the drawer beside my bed, the corners worn soft from worry and rereading. Sometimes, I'd imagine his voice, not as it was at the end, all secrets and regret, but as it had been on those rare, quiet mornings when we were just ourselves. For a long time, I hated him for what he'd done to us, for what he'd taken. Now, mostly, I just missed the man I thought I'd known. But I stopped letting that grief define me. The world had changed, or maybe just my place in it. I saw myself in the women who stopped by the diner, a single mother starting over, an older woman who'd left her marriage after decades, a teenager with a bruise fading beneath her sleeve. I saw how we all carried scars, visible or not, and how survival looked different for each of us. I listened more, judged less. When Alma needed help, or a regular lingered too long in their coffee, I was there. I found comfort in the rhythm of service, in the sense that I belonged to a community, even if they never truly knew my story. Emily grew. She made the soccer team, learned to swim, wrote a poem that made her teacher cry. Sometimes she'd ask about our old life, about the house with the red door, about the dog we'd left behind, about Owen. I never lied, but I chose my truths carefully. He loved you, I'd say. He made mistakes, but he wanted you to be safe. That seemed to be enough. She never asked if he was coming back, and I was grateful. Letters still came sometimes, always unsigned. Stories from other women, gratitude, confessions. I kept them in the old tin box under my bed, a testament to what the truth can do, even when it costs everything. Sometimes, late at night, I'd take them out and read them, letting the words knit something whole inside me that fear had once unraveled. I never heard from Elle again. Sometimes I wondered what became of her, if she found her own kind of peace, if she ever forgave herself. I hoped she did. I hoped all of us did, eventually. Years passed. The world moved on. The scandal faded into history, a cautionary tale told in podcasts and documentaries. No one came for us again. Emily grew taller than me, grew into her own sharp, kind self. I watched her live, really live, and I knew Owen's legacy could be more than just secrets and pain. On the anniversary of the day our lives unraveled, Emily and I went down to the ocean. We stood at the edge of the water, toes in the cold surf, wind in our hair. She held my hand, looked up at me with eyes that were old and young at the same time. "Are you happy, Mom?" she asked. I took a long breath, letting the salt and sun fill my lungs. I thought about everything we'd survived, the lies, the running, the betrayals and revelations. I thought about all the women who had ever been erased, overlooked, forced to start again. I thought about the home we'd built together, fragile and stubborn as a wildflower in concrete. "Yes," I told her, the truth soft and steady on my tongue. "I am." We watched the horizon for a long time, letting the past drift out to sea. When the sun touched the water, we turned for home, steps light and certain on the sand. My story didn't end with justice or revenge or perfect closure. It ended with a beginning, a new life, a new voice, written in our own words. I wasn't just the woman left behind, or the woman who ran. I was the woman who chose, who fought, who survived. And that was enough. That was everything. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments.